All right. Hey, it's Thursday. This is day 2, Introduction to Programming Logic. And where we're at here is we are still on tech background, but we'll finish that up today. Here's some of that information that we had before. And what I'm going to do is do a real brief review of Tuesday. Again, introduction to programming. We talked about operating system, working with the hardware, application communicates the operating system, and the user to the application. We talked this information, whether the software can be interpreted or compiled, source code, language, object code, blanket, and executable code. You should be able to explain this process. And if you go back, I covered it in more detail in the previous video. Okay, and then we talked about this process, and we're going to review it a little bit more in terms of what happens from storage to memory to the processor, and how that works. So then, this is day 2 here. So this was Thursday. I started out talking about a human rights source code in a particular programming language. We're going to use Python. Okay? The source code then is converted to an object code, which then is linked to an executable code. We talked about the compiler will compile based on an operating system. If you previously picture, the operating system talks to hardware and software talks to the operating system. So you compile it based on the operating system into an object code, and then you link in libraries to get an executable code, which is what the computer executes. And then, sounds kind of funny. Then we talked a little bit about scripting, and we did the example where we added the accounts. Okay? Obviously, there's not much information on the board about that because we did it together in class. Okay? And we used a bash script, if you remember, in class. In that bash script, we had the process in which we took a text file with everybody's name in it, and we used it through this script to make the accounts. We use this initial password, okay? Then we use this IP, because that's a private IP. That's what we would use when we are in PC 229 or MH 216. Okay, they're in the IT area. So we typed in our username, we typed in our password, and we were in. Remember, the Linux does not type anything after the password. When you type your password, you don't see anything. You don't see any dots, you don't see anything. Okay? Once we were in, the students changed their password. They made a directory, and the directory we made was a bin directory, and we learned how to change directories. We can go to one directory and back to another directory. In Linux, directories would be similar to folders. Okay, one last item here. If you are not on campus, we have a public address. Oops, we have a public address, this part belonging to NIACC. We have a public address that you can use to log in. So instead of using the private address, you can use this public address. to log in using PuTTY from another location. Okay. Then we took all this information and we organized it into a document and we submitted that on how to access the Linux box and some basic commands. Before we ran the script, we looked at it and we looked at the script code. I don't have it here, but then I drew a little bit of a flowchart. We looked at the script. There's a place in the script. We looked in the script, and there is a place in the script where it's a while statement. Okay, it's actually something called a do while, but it said while do, and then there's a place where it said if it was false, we performed all these instructions. If it was true, we skipped those instructions. Then we came to a spot where we got more data, went up here, and as long as there was more data, we kept processing it. When we were done, then the program stopped. All right. So we took a data file that had everybody's list in it. We used a script, and the information we created were the accounts in the Linux box. Okay, two more things. Then one of the last things we talked about was we have storage, memory, and the processor. Processor, central processing unit, has an arithmetic logic unit. It has a few other things, but that's what we're going to focus on. It can do arithmetic, it can make logical decisions, okay, and that's it. It can see if two sets of bits are greater than, or less than, or equal, and it can do arithmetic, add, multiply, divide, subtract, those type of things, and that's it. In order to do that, it needs an instruction to tell it what to do. So we have programs, like a program file here, and data file on storage. We bring the instructions into memory, okay, then we send an instruction to the processor, and it processes that instruction. If it needed some data, bring the data in the memory, and then bring that to the processor, do the work on that, then send the results back. High-speed staging areas in the processor are called registers. They hold the information while the processor is working on it and then send the results back to memory. Key items here. Typically, software is stored in storage somewhere. We have to bring the instructions into memory in order to work on them, and the instructions pass back and forth to the processor to get executed. Basically works that way. All right. So I worked in an account. The student wasn't here today, so I used their account as an example. We created the account. We have this public HTML place where you can put an index file and have web access. We have a bin file where we're going to store our programs, our Python programs and any scripts we're going to do. You don't need to worry about these. I talked about the D over here stands for directory. And these are permissions. Like the first one has a read, write, execute. That's for the owner. Then we have a read, write, execute. That's for the group, owner, group. And then we have a read-x, read and execute, but not write. That's for all others. Though this may not be perfectly clear at this point, it's a start when we talk about directories and permissions to files. And we'll learn some more, a few Linux commands as we go. There's a wealth of information out on the internet dealing with Linux. Or we used VI to edit while we were in Linux. There's a wealth of information there. Last comment, everyone should be working on their computer science circles coding. And we'll have a little time to work on that next week, and we're also going to be putting some of our own code in the Linux box starting next week. There is a list of things that are due today, actually, this Thursday. None real difficult. You need to look through those and get them completed. If you have some issues, let me know. And otherwise, we'll be good to go for Tuesday. That's it.